You found the Backup Wrap-Up, your go-to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we're declaring the death of the 3-2-1 rule, sort of. The 3-2-1 rule has been a foundation of backup best practices since the 90s, but it's time to admit that it's not quite enough. Ransomware has changed everything. Threat actors are going after your backups too. So the 3-2-1 rule had to evolve. It's now 3-2-1-1-0. We'll break down what those extra numbers mean and why immutable and air-gapped copies are now non-negotiable, and why zero backup failures matters more than ever. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years. That's a long time. Ever since I had to tell my boss there were no backups of that production database that we just lost. I don't want that to happen to you, and that's why I do this. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Welcome to the show. Hi, folks. Wanted to mention my new book, Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery, which is now available for pre-order at Amazon.com. I wrote it with my co-author, Dr. Mike Saylor, who's a blue team cyber defense expert. He really knows his stuff. There are dozens of books to tell you how not to get ransomware. Our book starts with the assumption you're probably going to get ransomware. So we tell you how to respond to it and how to recover from it. It's unlike anything else out there. We tell you what you need to do now to be able to respond when it happens. We covered defenses to reduce the blast radius, how to protect your backup system, incident response procedures, negotiation strategies, backup recovery techniques, and how to prevent it from happening again. The tech reviewers gave it overwhelmingly positive feedback, so I think it's going to be a big seller. Pre-order it now. Search for Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery, or just look for my name, W. Curtis Preston. Hope you like it. Hi, I'm W. Curtis Preston, a.k.a. Mr. Backup, and I have with me a guy who I used to think was smart until he told me the story he just told me, Prasanna Malaiyandi. How's it going, Prasanna?
I'm good, and I'm glad I'm bringing you to reality rather than putting me up on a pedestal with all my random knowledge.
So what did you just tell me? Why did you have a cut on your forehead?
Yeah, so for people who, by the way, we do YouTube, so the podcast, if you want to catch us live.
You want to watch us on YouTube?
Yeah. Go to the Backup Wrap-Up channel. You can watch us there. But, when I was younger, I decided I wanted to be like, all those wrestlers, like where they're like, and then they crush a can on their forehead.
Yeah, you did that.
Yeah. So I had an empty can, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. I'll try that too. Yeah, let's just say that I ended up with the cut. Yeah.
Yeah. We, of course, started this conversation because of this little gash on my forehead due to just my inability to navigate. Me trying to prove a fundamental law of physics, that no two objects can occupy the same space at the same time.
I think someone's just moving stuff around on you, Curtis. I think like things jumping out and places you don't expect. I think someone's messing with you.
I wish I could blame that on this. Unfortunately, this was a shelf which I mounted. Yeah, so I can't really blame moving around stuff, but
it's all good.
Yeah, but speaking of moving around stuff, the 3-2-1 rule has been moved around a bit, I think.
Well, what is a 3-2-1 rule?
Yeah, well, let's start with that. And I would say that it is like, first off, let's just say, I would say it's one of the most fundamental sort of concepts in backup, right?
Do you remember when every episode had the 3-2-1 rule in it?
Yeah, it came up a lot, right? And so it's somewhat morphed over time in terms of what the 3-2-1 means. But let's just start with it. It's 3 copies of your data on 2 different media, one of which is somewhere else. And that we used to say one of which is off-site. I've changed that to somewhere else because that sort of goes with the cloud concept, right?
By the way, if you want to listen to more about where the 321 rule came from, we actually did an episode with the person who created the
Yes.
321
Yeah, the
term.
coin Peter it was a Krog. I think it's pronounced Krog. It's Krogh, I believe. Yeah, with the guy that coined the term. He was is a digital photographer. Coined the term back in the 90s, and we actually had him on the podcast. That was very cool. I'll put a link to that in the podcast. And he was just trying to help digital photographers do the right thing. And we're like, yes, we like this right thing, and the thing is, it should be more just like what we're going to talk about today. It's like a very basic, like if you aren't at least doing this, you aren't doing backups.
Yeah.
It's not like this is like the way to architect a backup system. This is, if you don't have at least 3 copies of your data, if you don't have it on at least 2 pieces of media and at least one of them somewhere else, you just don't even talk to me, right? Where do we end up using this rule a lot as a sort of a proof point to say, well, you are not doing backups? Do you remember where that comes up a lot?
I think this came up when we started looking at like SaaS backups.
Yeah, or just or the non-existence thereof, right? Right, because there are so many people. It's like I have found myself arguing with people online.
I'm laughing because I think one of the first times, maybe like 6 months after we met, or maybe a year after we met,
Yeah,
I remember you going on this rant about how frustrated you were with Microsoft,
yeah,
claiming Microsoft 365 didn't need backup.
yeah. And there was and is a guy that actually is a Microsoft 365 expert, and he wrote a book about Microsoft 365, and I bought it just to see what he had to say. And literally, it was like the chapter on backup basically said, strictly speaking, you don't need to back up Microsoft 365. And I was like, gah, right? And again, it's nothing against Microsoft 365. It's just to go to this topic. Your copies, as I make quotes in the air, aren't copies. Number one, it doesn't conform to any of the 321 rule, right? So there aren't multiple copies. There can be versioning within 365, but your copies aren't copies. Why aren't they copies?
Because, well, one of two things. One, they either rely on something else, like they're part of production,
Right.
right? So as an example, if you're using RecycleBin to hold your copies or whatever else, right, it's still part of the same production database, and so you have that issue. Or the fact that like these are things that you don't have access to as a backup admin.
It's multiple things, right? Like you said, it's not a copy because it's not a copy, right? Everything's all in one place. You're not actually taking a copy of it and putting that copy on some other piece of storage. If you copy, yes, if you go on your hard drive and or your drive, I guess, it's not always a hard drive these days, but usually not a hard drive these days. If you go on your laptop and you right click on your drive and you say copy this file and then paste it, you've essentially made a copy of the file. So you at least have a separate instance of that file. That is a copy. It's not yet a backup.
Yep.
What's the difference between a copy and a backup?
It's on something else. It's still sitting right next to your production.
Yeah, that's the whole 321. If you just make a bunch of copies and you don't separate those copies from the drive, right? So this is like you could do 3 copies, but all on the same drive. You don't really have a backup at that point. Yeah. You need to put it on another drive.
It's like when we talk about NAS systems, right? And one of my former employers, right? It's okay, you can do snapshots of your production volume, which is great. You have
Yeah.
all those versions, like you said, but typically those snapshots lived with the production. So if you lost
Yeah.
your volume or you lost the system, you lost your copies.
And those are not copies, right? Those are virtual copies, but you know, you were saying it sits on the same thing. It's relying on the storage, so that's not a copy at all. So that doesn't follow the 3-2-1 rule, right? So my point is that usually when we use the 3-2-1 rule as a cudgel these days, we're using it to just basically prove it's like, look, snapshots by themselves are not backups. SaaS, recycle bin, et cetera, retention policies in Microsoft 365, which is like a fancier version of the recycle bin. You can say, hey, you can't, every object, which is a term that would include emails, files, spreadsheets, et cetera. Every object has to be retained for at least 30 days or 90 days, whatever. You could create a retention policy that every object, once it's created, is retained for at least 90 days, even after its deletion. And you can say that that copy, while being stored, is immutable, right? You can say that it cannot be deleted out of that thing, right? But it's all it really is a big fancy database with a it's a special purpose database that holds the emails, that holds the files, that holds all of that, and so you're not copying anything anywhere. If you're not copying it anywhere, it's not a backup. It's a convenience copy, just like the copying and pasting a file within the same hard drive.
Okay, so Microsoft would argue that with Exchange or with Microsoft 365, they replicate their data to an offsite location, right? Secondary, just in case something happens to the primary data center, they're not losing your service.
And that replication has a delay in it, right? So it is a delayed replicated copy, which is great. The only problem is you get no access to that, right? So, and I've verified this as a customer of a very large company paying, a crap ton of money every month to Microsoft. Say, hey, let's say somebody obliterated we obliterated a user within 365, or ransomware attacked a user within 365. Could we use that delayed copy as a method to restore it? And the answer was an emphatic no. That is not what it's for, right? It's there for what do you call it? It's there for essentially DR for them, right? Which is good to know, right? That they do have DR for their for their environment, but it's not for you, right?
And I think that's important to understand as you're going from workloads on systems that you own, that you operate, right, versus SaaS, where you now have this split responsibility model, and you might have to do additional things in these SaaS environments that you think you don't have to do, but it's actually more important that you do. Backup being one of them.
Yeah. And if you don't have access to that backup, if you don't have independent control over that backup, then you don't really have a backup.
Yep.
Right. So this is what the 3-2-1 rule is about, right? Is that we need to make another copy. That copy needs to be in your hot little hands, not necessarily physically, right, in your hot little hands. It could be in the cloud. It could be it just needs to be somewhere else. Again, and because in the SaaS world, they don't even conform to the 2. Right? They don't conform to the 3, they don't conform to the 2, and they definitely don't conform to the 1, which is why we end up using the 3-2-1 rule as a cudgel for saying that the stuff that they do is not a backup.
Yep.
And so while the title of this podcast might have suggested that the 3-2-1 rule is dead, it's not. It still has a purpose, and that is, and the purpose that it serves primarily is it's a cudgel to say, hey, that's not those aren't backups at all.
But why does it matter to say that those are not backups? Right? Why does that matter?
Yeah, it's a great. Because again, if something happens, specifically the number one reason people are restoring these days, ransomware. If a ransomware attack attacks your 365 account and you're unable to use your backups to put everything back, then why were you even making them, right?
Yeah.
The other thing, and again, this isn't so much on the 3-2-1 rule, but the other thing is that the other thing about, especially when we talk about 365 and similar products, the thing they have that some people think of as backup, it also is really bad at restore, right? Just functionality wise. Yeah. It's good at bringing back a handful of files or a handful of emails that you were looking for. But in terms of put my inbox back to the way it looked before this thing happened, it just simply doesn't have that functionality.
It's a bit more like an e-discovery tool or an archive-like system rather than a backup and restore tool.
Right. Yeah. So why then? So if we still think that it has value, why then do people say 3-2-1 rule is dead? People like Rick Vanover over at Veeam.
Well, I remember when he was on the podcast, and I think he added a few extra numbers after the 3-2-1, right?
Yeah, he has indeed. In fact, when I was researching for this podcast, nobody ever actually visits the site anymore. You just get the Google summary, right? Mm-hmm. But in the Google summary, this is new. I've actually never seen this until just now. In the Google summary, there was a video, and it was Rickatron doing the 3-2-1-1-0 on the glass thing.
Nice.
And I was like, oh, look at Rick. He's popular enough that he shows up in the thing there. The question that was on the table was, why do people say that the 3-2-1 rule is not enough?
Because 3-2-1 is good for most cases, but things have changed. I know you alluded to it earlier that most of the time when you're recovering, it's due to a cybersecurity incident or ransomware or something else like that, where just having that one copy offsite is not good enough.
Well, it's not just that it's offsite. The big thing is that it needs to be immutable, right? Mm-hmm. That's the thing that we really, in my first 25 years in the backup space, I don't recall ever using that term.
I did.
You did?
I did, yes. But it was more intended from a compliance perspective. So it was around like Sarbanes-Oxley and those sort of requirements rather than backup and cybersecurity. Yeah.
And that shows sort of your journey versus my journey, right? I was focused mainly on backup and recovery. And what's funny is I do remember a lot of SOX compliance stuff that we had to do, but I think we still didn't use that term, right? Let's define the term immutable. Immutable just literally means that it cannot be changed, right? Yeah. And this is true that cybersecurity incidents, aka ransomware, usually, is, I think, the number one reason that people do restores these days. And since that's the case, and since we know that the first thing that a threat actor is going to do is attempt to disable your backup system. Mm-hmm. This is why the first thing, the next thing you need to be adding to that 3-2-1 is that at least one of your copies needs to be immutable. Now, do you want to define immutable?
Yeah, so immutable means that you're not able to delete the copy. No one can really delete the copy before a certain time period has elapsed. So you might say, okay, keep the copies around for 3 months. And before 3 months, an admin can't go delete it. A malicious actor can't go delete it. The system doesn't allow you to delete it unless you basically go and pull the drives out and pour acid on it or use a giant drill.
Because nothing is immutable if you have physical access.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, immutable just means it can't be changed, right? But when we talk about this world, essentially, I think the only thing that's truly immutable is if no one can change it. Meaning you can't change it, even if you have all super powerful admin access to the system. If you can still change your mind and then delete it, then that's not really immutable, in my opinion.
Or
right?
change a retention period
Or
down to 1 day.
change a retention period, which then causes it to be deleted, right? If you can do that after the fact, if you turn if you go to the super, extra special level, then that's not really immutable. Now, there are some systems where, I know that, where the normal customer can't delete it. And so there are some situations where a vendor has the ability to go in and delete it. I have less of a problem with that, but it's still not truly immutable if there's still a backdoor, even if the backdoor has lots of humans in front of it, right? Humans can be engineered.
Yep. That's exactly what I was thinking about, was especially with AI out there and people being able to do deep fakes and other things like that, right? It is a possibility.
Yeah. I think that really the way to do it is to have, to use something like object lock with object storage, right? Where you basically say, I'm going to put this thing here. It's going to be here 90 days or whatever number you have. It's going to be here 90 days and no one, including me, can delete it before that time frame. And I can't change my mind. Once I put it there, I can't then go, 90 days. What did I say, 90 days? I meant 3 days, right? Because that's another way that a threat actor might delete the backups by just simply telling the backups to delete themselves.
Yeah. And I think people should go research the immutable functionality of their storage systems, because most do support 2 modes. Right, one that's very strict that won't allow anyone versus one that does allow super users to tweak things. So just make sure you understand the implications of the systems you're using.
Thanks for bringing that up. It's human nature to choose the less restrictive of the 2 options, because you're like, I can't change my mind, right? What happens if we have this big part of the company and then, we have a big reduction or something. We lay off a bunch of people. We want to, whatever thing stuck in your mind, and you want to then go in and prematurely delete those backups. And so you choose the less secure option. It's human nature to choose that. And I'm saying, if you're able to do it, that means a threat actor can possibly do it. If they're able to get in with, a stolen credential and MFA fatigue, or they're able to exploit some sort of system weakness so that, boom, they are now you in the backup system. They can do whatever it is you can do.
Yep.
Then I don't like that idea.
Yeah. 100% agree.
Yeah. So that's the 3, 2, 1, 1. And then the 0 is just 0 failures, right? Which sounds nice. This is,
when you say failures, what are you referring to? Because it could be backup failures, it could be storage failures, it could be process failures, it could be people failures.
It's mainly when Rick talks about it, he's talking about zero backup failures, right? The thing is, backup failures happen. Generally speaking, they happen due to process failures today. It used to be that backups would fail on a very regular basis due to that wonderful thing we call tape, right? And again, there was nothing wrong with tape. It was just how we were using tape. And there was a fundamental mismatch of technology. But we've generally solved a lot of these issues. And so backups, generally speaking, work, and are successful most of the time. You do need to make, as part of your system, you need to make sure that you are regularly monitoring the success of your backups. And when they don't succeed, you do something about it.
Can I add a...
Nope, sorry, that's the end of the podcast.
No, I think I was as you were talking, I was thinking about sort of ransomware and other things like that. You know what 32110 does not really capture?
What?
The fact that there is a clean backup without any ransomware that exists in your system.
Yeah, that's a good.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that, and I don't have an issue with that. Actually, it's a good point, and that may be something that Rick talks about in his. I guess maybe I didn't think about it, but that's actually a really good point, right? Is that you should be scanning your backups for ransomware. The hard part is that a lot of times the backup itself doesn't have ransomware in it. What it does have is encrypted files in it. Because the ransomware is the actual code that's making this happen, and then the encrypted files are worthless, right? Yeah. I will say that when we wrote the book that's coming out in January, learning ransomware response and recovery, this was something we debated quite a bit about, right? When you go to do a restore, how do you verify that the thing that you're restoring to is clean? How do you verify the thing that you're restoring is clean? And the answer is, it's actually a really hard answer, right? Yeah. You do it as best as you can up front. I like systems that check the backups when they're doing them. I like systems that check the backups as they're doing restores. And then I think you should be checking. Hopefully, in the initial phase, which we covered all of the different phases in the book on actually responding to an attack. Definitely early on, you should have figured out what it was that attacked you, right? You should know what it is you're looking for. You should know the actual ransomware variant that you have, and so you should be able to relatively easily look for that in anything that you're restoring, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, so to go back to the topic at hand, 32110. It's just, again, 321 is great, but it's time for it to grow up a little bit. If you don't have 321, then you don't have a backup. But if you don't have 32110, then you don't have a backup that's going to be helpful in the time of a ransomware response, which is most likely going to be the number one reason. Why did it become the number one reason, besides the fact that ransomware took off? Why did this become the number one reason people restore? What do you think? I have an opinion.
Well, two things. One is ransomware actors, right? They're going to ask for ransom. Mm-hmm. And so what's one good way not to pay the ransom is to do the recovery yourself. And so that's why you have your backups. Yeah. And that's why you need that immutable copy. So then the second part is ransomware actors got smart, and then they started targeting backup systems because they realized if you can't fix stuff, then there's more likely to pay them. And so that's why it sort of has come under attack.
Yeah, that was all very valid. Wasn't what I was going for. It's just me sort of waxing philosophical.
Yeah.
The reason why ransomware became like the number one reason is that we fixed the old number one reason. As I was growing up, technically, the number one reason we were restoring was technical failure, right? Hard drives were failing, servers were failing, and we addressed that. Right? Hardware and storage has become so much more resilient that we are almost never restoring because the hardware itself failed. Yeah. We are restoring you due to one of two reasons. One is somebody did something stupid. Well, actually, one reason. Somebody did something stupid, right? Either they deleted something they shouldn't have deleted, or they clicked on something they shouldn't have clicked on, or did something else that then resulted in a ransomware attack, right? Yeah. And so the only reason we restore anything these days is stupid people. Yeah.
I wonder, like, as we're talking about the 32110,
yeah,
and maybe Rick has stats on this, I wonder how many organizations are actually following 32110.
Not enough. That's a great question. You just look at all of the ransomware stories, and we have many of them as case studies in the book. So many of them are, and then the backups were then deleted or encrypted or whatever, right? locked out of the backup system. Not enough is the answer to that question. Hopefully that will change over time, but maybe the book will, solve this, but yeah. All right. Well, there you go. 3-2-1 rule is dead. Long live 32110.
Does that mean I need to update the tattoo on my arm?
Yeah. I never know what's going to come out of your mouth, I tell you. All right. Well, thanks for chatting, Prasanna.
I will be making my appointment with the tattoo artist as soon as we're off this call.
Absolutely. And thanks to all of you with your 321 tattoos. By the way, if anybody's got any weird backup tattoos, I'd love to see that. That is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.